Creo que aprender un idioma es mucho más que saber todos los tiempos correctos de los verbos o poder traducir palabra por palabra sin hacer errores. Para mí, aprender un idioma es crear oportunidades para uno. Es crecer sus comunidades y sus conexiones globales. Y es cambiar sus perspectivas sin tener que cambiar su entorno. Essentially, what I'm saying is that learning a language changed my life more than once. I officially started learning Spanish at the age of 12, but those first few years of language learning seemed to pass in a blur of a very frustrated me, never quite knowing how to conjugate a verb or how to say the right word. Life change number one happened a few years later, when a new Spanish teacher walked into my classroom and changed my world by introducing me to a series of colourful characters through the films of Spanish director Pedro Almodóvar, or took me on a journey into the magical realism of Gabriel García Márquez's novels, as well as telling me about the different musical and rhythmical genres that existed throughout Latin America. All of a sudden, Spanish was no longer confined to the four walls of the classroom. It was an experience, an adventure, and a discovery that I was dying to get to know more about. So after studying Spanish at university, I went on to have many trips to Spanish-speaking countries, which ended up with me living in Colombia for 3 years, and during that time, going on holiday in Cuba and meeting my Cuban husband, who is somewhere within the members of the crowd. But don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to suggest that if you learn a language, you're guaranteed to meet your future wife or husband. But then on the other hand, you never know. So all in all, what it made me realize is that learning a language wasn't just about getting the right grammar, knowing all the vocabulary, but it was about learning about the people, the culture, the geography, the history that surrounded that language. Which takes me on to life change number 2. Soon after I graduated, I went from learning a language to teaching one, but not Spanish this time. I decided to teach the most in-demand language in the world, one which pretty much guaranteed to give me a job wherever I chose to go, and one which I think most of you sitting here probably don't even remember learning. Now, for the majority of the world's population, this language isn't just a nice skill to have. It's a necessity. It's the only way that they can get a job. It's a better, more prosperous life, a way out of their country, a new identity, or even nationality. So at this point, it made me realize just how privileged I'd been to have English as my native language. But not only that, to have been educated within a system that really prioritized language learning within its curriculum. Another thing I learned as a teacher, taking some tips from my former Spanish teacher, is again applying that law of no, learning a language isn't just about grammar and vocabulary. I told my multilingual, multinational students that English was spoken in lots of different countries, and I shared through food and music and dance and art how these cultures differed and how they were similar. I also got my students to talk about their own countries. What were they most proud of about where they came from? What did they miss the most about being wherever they were, wherever they had to move in order to learn English? So all in all, it made me realize the importance of making language learning not a chore and not something that they felt they had to do, but that it was something that they wanted to do. Which now ties me to life change number 3. We fast forward to March 2020. Now, I think everyone can remember what state the world was in then. My state of mind was feeling trapped and frustrated. Why? Because I could no longer travel the way I used to. So again, a landmark moment, making me realize just how lucky I'd been all these years leading up to the pandemic, because I'd been able to travel with very little or no restrictions. But on the positive side, it got me to think about travel as a concept. What does it actually mean? Does it mean having to pick up your passport, get on a plane, and go abroad? Not necessarily. So a lot of people were getting very creative during this time of the pandemic. I'm sure some of you are among these people. People offered online courses in cooking from different countries around the world, dancing classes, music, and even virtual tours around their capital cities. So all in all, making travel more accessible. It didn't seem so out of reach. You could actually do some traveling online. And it also led me to think about my next life choices. I'd been so lucky to have these incredible experiences, gained all this knowledge through my travels and through learning another language. How could I put that to good use? How could I give that back to the community? How could I transition from being I am this person to we are these people? So I decided to do this by offering a space where people could come together on a weekly basis and improve, practice, or even learn from scratch their Spanish skills. I also reached out to native Spanish speakers living in the community that I didn't know lived here until then, and got them to come along and share their stories and talk about their countries and cultures, and how actually Spanish from Mexico has nothing to do with Spanish from Colombia or Spain. So let me take you back to the beginning of this talk. Creo que aprender un idioma es mucho más que saber los tiempos correctos de todos los verbos. Es más que poder traducir palabra por palabra sin hacer errores. Para mí, aprender un idioma es crear oportunidades para uno. Es crecer sus conexiones globales y es cambiar sus perspectivas sin tener que cambiar su entorno. What I actually said was, I believe that learning a language isn't about knowing all the grammar tenses correctly or being able to translate word for word without making a mistake. For me, learning a language is about creating opportunities for yourself, building and growing your global community and connections. And more importantly, changing your perspectives without necessarily having to change your surroundings, just like my Spanish teacher did for me all of those years ago. Thank you.